What can a 24-hour breakfast restaurant and a tactics game teach us about leadership in a crisis? Waffle House and MENACE look like a strange pair. You've got a hurricane-ready breakfast chain and a tactics game about being cut off from central command. But they both teach the same crisis skill. When the plan stops matching reality, a leader has to figure out what still works, what constraint is blocking action, and which decisions need to move closer to the damage. Imagine this. A hurricane hits overnight. By morning, the Waffle House is still standing, but it no longer works the way it did yesterday. Everything the restaurant relies on in the normal day-to-day is gone. The plan was built for yesterday's world, you see. It assumed power, roads, staffing, suppliers, registers, inventory, communication, and customers moving through the system in predictable ways. A crisis strips away those assumptions. Jessica Heyer-Stamm, a Georgia Tech researcher who studied Waffle House disaster response logistics, treats Waffle House as a disaster response system. That's important for us because we're studying the preparation behind the restaurant. We're talking preseason hurricane planning, limited menus, vendor coordination, fuel and even generator arrangements, the communications backup, field teams, reopening decisions under constraint. An open Waffle House gives a rough signal of restaurant operating status. A closed one tells you that even this prepared restaurant system cannot function at that location yet. The index gives responders a crude clue about local conditions, while the actual community situation may still be worse or more complicated. That's basically the leadership problem here. A crisis changes the job. Under routine conditions, leaders can optimize within known roles and reporting lines. They can review dashboards, they can route decisions upwards, they can use the plan as a stable reference point. MENACE gives us a game version of that pressure. You command from the TCRN Impetus, a strike cruiser that functions as your mobile headquarters. Communications with the core worlds are cut off. You are effectively at the top of the local chain of command. Distress calls come in. Operations appear on the star map. Squads need recovery. Your equipment is very limited. Local factions remember what you do and what you ignore. But what makes MENACE interesting is that the crisis starts before the tactical battle. The pressure begins on the star map before any tactical battle is in sight. That is where the Waffle House comparison starts to make sense. A crisis, it's a chain of constrained deployments. Every choice changes the next menu of choices. Routine leadership often assumes a functioning organization. There's a team, there's a hierarchy, there's a plan. There's a known customer, and consequences usually arrive with enough delay for review and correction. In that world, leadership strives for efficiency not just because it can, but because it needs to. A crisis destroys that outlook. A person can be competent at normal management and still fail in crisis because the inputs have changed. That's why the Waffle House case works here. It's concrete. Before hurricane season, the Waffle House protocol describes preparation. Updated contacts, vendor coordination, limited menus, communications options, fuel, generators, supplies, and response roles. During the crisis, the question changes from normal operation to safe partial operation. Instead of relying on the same old routines, the question becomes, what is still feasible? Those questions sound more like logistics than leadership theory. That's basically why they matter so much to this. In a crisis, leadership becomes operational. The Waffle House is so famous for being able to remain open that the Federal Emergency Management Agency uses it to inform disaster response. Oh, let that sink in. An official government bureau uses the Waffle House to gauge how bad a situation is. The Waffle House Index is usually explained with colors. Green means the restaurant is operating close to normal. Yellow means it's operating with a limited menu or partial capacity. Red means the Waffle House is closed. The colors matter because a restaurant cannot open by attitude alone. So the index measures restaurant operating status. Waffle House closes when closure is the safe option. Employees have families and homes to worry about. So let's go to yellow because the limited menus are the most interesting. Green and red are pretty self-explanatory. So a limited menu is an operating tool because it cuts the number of decisions the restaurant has to process. Which menu they can use is dependent on what is in stock and whether or not there's power, water, or other amenities. That is prioritization in mechanical form. Once that decision is made, the decision changes the job for everyone below it. Workers are given a simpler version of the work that can survive damaged conditions. That is the first management skill. Reduce the situation until people can act while the full picture is still unclear. Karl Weick helps explain why that is harder than it sounds. You see, Karl Weick's idea of sense-making is that people often do not understand a crisis first, and then they often act first, notice what happens, and then build meaning from the result. And in uncertain situations, the facts are incomplete. So leaders and teams make small moves, watch the response, update their interpretation, and decide what the situation seems to be. A simpler version. Sense-making is how people turn confusion into a usable story that lets them act. So for crisis leadership, Weick's key point is that waiting for perfect clarity can be dangerous. The organization needs to keep moving because action itself produces the information needed to understand the crisis. Basically, you're trying to answer what kind of event is this while the event is still changing. So the leadership task is to reduce confusion enough that people can move, then update the picture as reality answers back. This is why simplified categories are so useful. Green, yellow, red. Full menu, limited menus, or shut down. Waffle House gives us a usable operating picture. Menace has the same pressure on the strategy layer. The game does more than ask, which fight do you want? Operations are multi-mission chains. They appear on the star map, stay available for a limited number of turns, and can expire. Ignoring them can damage critical faction relations. The game is asking you to decide which crisis defines the moment. That is the sense-making problem. The first crisis decision is, what kind of situation am I in? If you define the situation wrong, efficient action can make the system worse. Radical prioritization starts before resource allocation. It starts with interpretation and reinterpretation. If the situation worsens, the Waffle House manager might need to go from yellow to red. If the situation gets better because he gets the power going again, he might be able to support a bigger menu. Still limited, just not as limited as before. Once the operating picture is clear enough to act, resources have to move. And this, my friends, is where things get interesting. We start with efficiency in normal times. We start with J. Barney. You see, J. Barney is a strategy scholar best known for the resource-based view. His basic claim is that a firm's advantage can come from resources that are valuable, rare, hard to copy, and organized well. Barney's core idea is that strategy depends on what resources an organization has and whether those resources can actually produce an advantage. He's best known for the resource-based view of the firm. The basic argument is companies do not win just because they choose the right market. They win because they control resources, capabilities, knowledge, relationships, processes, or assets that competitors cannot easily copy. Barney's test is often summarized as VRIO, valuable. Does the resource help the organization perform better or survive pressure? Rare. Do competitors lack it? Inimitable. Is it hard to copy because of history, complexity, culture, timing, or tacit knowledge? Organized. Is the company actually structured to use it well? As you can see, Barney is amazing when things are green. We optimize and streamline our resources to the point that others cannot follow. Barney gives us the starting point. Resources matter when the organization is built to use them. But how does that hold up in times of crisis? That is where our counterpoint comes in. David Teece, Gary Pisano, and Amy Shuen push the argument into crisis environments. They developed the idea of dynamic capabilities, which means the ability to change the organization's resource base when the environment changes. Their point, you'll see, is pretty practical. Ordinary capabilities let an organization perform today's work. Dynamic capabilities let an organization change the way it works when today's model stops fitting the world. A normal restaurant capability is serving the full menu with normal staff, normal suppliers, normal electricity, and normal customer flow. A dynamic capability is what lets the restaurant shift into storm mode. Reduced menu, different supply movement, generator use, altered communication, field teams, and local reopening judgment. So Teece, Pisano, and Shuen are saying that the crisis advantage comes from reconfiguration. The organization has to direct what it already has toward a world that no longer matches the old setup. Kathleen Eisenhardt and Jeffrey Martin make that less abstract. They argue that dynamic capabilities are repeatable operating moves. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. This sounds all good and nice, but it is rather vague. What I'm trying to do is make my example make it easy, because Waffle House has already made it practical. We would be remiss to not mention Eisenhardt and Martin that bridged this concept from the abstract to the concrete. Kathleen Eisenhardt and Jeffrey Martin argue that dynamic capabilities are the specific organizational routines that help firms adapt, reconfigure, and compete in changing markets. The key idea is that companies do not adapt through vague flexibility. They adapt through repeatable processes that let them move resources, recombine knowledge, and change what the organization can do. But Eisenhardt and Martin also make an important distinction. In moderately dynamic markets, dynamic capabilities can look like stable, disciplined routines. A company can study the market, follow a process, and improve its position. In high-velocity markets where things can change fast and feel unpredictable, dynamic capabilities become simpler, faster, and more experimental. The organization cannot rely on perfect analysis. It needs quick rules, rapid iteration, and the ability to learn while acting. So the short version is, dynamic capabilities are the practical routines organizations use to change themselves. In stable change, those routines can be structured. In chaotic change, they have to become fast, simple, and experimental. In Waffle House terms, that means the organization has practiced how to shift from a normal menu to a reduced menu. It has practiced how to move food from a closed location to a viable one. It has practiced how to send field teams toward damaged areas. It has practiced how to reuse normal restaurant assets under abnormal conditions. Their point is that adaptability is not just a mood. It is a set of rehearsed moves that managers can actually trigger. And in a crisis, this becomes the resource conversion problem. Can the organization turn what it has into what the situation now requires? Waffle House shows that conversion under disruption. Fuel arrangements matter because generators without fuel are dead equipment. Vendor contacts matter because supply chains do not coordinate themselves during disruption. Communications backup matters because headquarters cannot coordinate what it cannot hear. Food movement between stores matters because one's location's inventory may be trapped while another location can reopen. This is where jump teams matter. A jump team is a mobile response group sent toward the active constraint. It can carry people, tools, authority, technical knowledge, supplies, or simply enough attention to make local action possible. That is their second skill. Stop asking only what resources you have, but what you can do to optimize their use. Ask whether those resources can become useful under the current constraint. Menace makes this resource problem easy to feel because supply is not decorative. Before a mission, you choose who goes, what they carry, and what you can afford to deploy. Tanks, walkers, infantry squads, accessories, specialist weapons, and orbital support all compete for limited capacity. The impetus can be upgraded, but it does not erase scarcity. It gives you more ways to turn scarce resources into battlefield effects. A squad sitting safely on the ship is preserved, but that can be wasteful. A squad sent into the right operation becomes leverage, but you can lose it as well. Commit the wrong squad to the wrong operation, and you may change what the force can do next. Permanent losses make the point concrete. Menace can permanently destroy squad leaders and their squads, and ordinary squad casualties reduce what the squad can do because casualtied soldiers stop contributing firepower. Crisis leadership treats allocation as a future options problem. The question becomes, can we win this fight and still have enough left for tomorrow? Then comes the execution problem. Central control looks responsible in normal conditions because information is stable enough to travel upward and return as instruction. That, however, breaks in crisis. The store knows whether the road is passable. The field team knows whether the generator is failing. The local operator knows whether supplies arrived. The delivery crew knows whether the route is usable. The center may still have the formal authority, but the edge has the freshest reality. If every decision travels upward, the organization starts spending time it no longer has. So how do we conceptualize all this? How can we understand what's happening here? Bungay's The Art of Action is about how organizations execute strategy when reality is too complex for perfect plans. His core idea is that leaders should stop trying to control every action from the top. Instead, they should create clarity of intent, make sure everyone understands the goal and the reasons behind it and the boundaries they must operate within. Then, lower-level teams use their own judgment to act. The key problem Bungay identifies is the gap between plans and reality. Plans are always incomplete because conditions change. Information is partial, and people on the ground see things leaders cannot see. So, effective organizations need a system where people can adapt without waiting for permission. In simple terms, tell people what outcome matters, not every step to take. Bungay is useful because he supports the idea that in a crisis, leadership should shift from command and control to decentralized execution guided by clear intent. The leader's job is not to write the perfect script. I'll reiterate that. The leader's job is not to write the perfect script. It is to make sure everyone knows the mission well enough to improvise intelligently when the script breaks. Detailed orders rot when the field changes faster than the plan can update, which you might have learned a little something about in my previous episode about emergent strategy. So imagine headquarters says, open at 8. At 8, the road is blocked, the generator is unstable, half the staff cannot arrive, and the delivery route is uncertain. The instruction has expired. The field conditions changed faster than the order could. Bungay's answer is intent. Intent tells actors what result matters, what limits they cannot cross, and what judgment they are allowed to use. Serve safely if the location can support it. Use the limited menu and choose what you can actually serve from the limited menu. Choose that which fits the situation. Focus on what you can do, even if it isn't what headquarters would expect is possible. Close if opening puts workers or customers in danger. Headquarters still matters because it arranges vendors, stages equipment, creates communication channels, establishes the simplified menus to make it easier to decide what to do, and defines response roles. But if every local decision has to travel upward, the environment will choose for you. Delay becomes the decision. Menace is weaker on this point, and I would have to say that openly. The player directly controls squads and battles. You choose positions, weapons, suppression, vehicles, and mission objectives yourself. Analogies, they never get everything 100% right, and games tend to want to give the players control of everything. In reality, what we can control is a lot less than what we can control in a video game. The MENACE analogy's stronger use is command isolation and triage. You are cut off from the core worlds, communications are gone, you're at the top of the local chain. Operations branch across multiple missions, and every operation asks what you are willing to risk now for a larger campaign position later. That still reinforces the execution problem. What can the center actually control when local problems arrive faster than the center can resolve all of them? The answer is intent. The center has to make the desired outcome clear enough that local actors can act when instructions are incomplete. This is the third skill. Decide what must stay centralized and what the environment has already pushed closer to the field. A crisis punishes organizations that confuse control with awareness. The person at the center may have authority, but the person at the edge may have the freshest reality. If the system cannot connect those two facts, it loses time. The lazy version of this lesson is improvise. However, that word is too vague, even for me. Improvisation sounds useful until someone has to decide whether a store should open on generator power with a reduced menu and incomplete staffing. The Waffle House points to a stricter lesson. Prepare the improvisation. The limited menu is cooked before the storm. Vendor relations are already warm. Fuel, generators, communications, and field rules have been brought through before the weather turns the map into a constraint puzzle. The system has room to move because preparation made certain moves available. Crisis leadership asks planning to produce capacity. A plan that only describes normal operations is fragile at best. A plan that creates decision rules, simplified options, resource pathways, and local authority is more useful when conditions change. MENACE makes this visible through consequence. Skipped operations, faction relationships, squad recovery, supply costs, permanent losses, and operation rewards all change the next decision. A crisis is a sequence of decisions made with incomplete information, damaged capacity, and accumulating consequences. The leader is trying to preserve enough fuel, labor, communication, authority, and readiness for the next move. So I would replace the usual crisis advice with a more concrete test. When the system starts to break, don't ask, are we following the plan? Ask, what situation are we actually in? What can still function? What resource can we actually turn into action? Which decision has the environment already pushed closer to the field? The Waffle House Index's restaurant operating status is a rough signal. It became useful because an operating restaurant depends on several local systems working at least partly. The limited menu converts a damaged operating environment into a simpler decision environment. The logistics are important because supplies, generators, fuel, communications, and field teams give the organization ways to move under constraint. The caveats matter because crisis systems carry trade-offs. Worker safety matters, evacuation matters, family obligation matters, business incentives matter. The myth is less useful than the mechanism. MENACE gives the game version of this. You are the local command structure after a wider command structure stops working. You answer distress calls. You choose which operations deserve scarce capacity. You accept that skipped operations, squad losses, readiness strain, and faction relationships change the future operating picture. It's a pressure model rather than a neatly constrained version of predictable standard reality. It makes the player feel the basic structure of crisis leadership. Too many signals, limited capacity, consequences that persist. The strongest lesson is simple. The perfect plan assumes too much stability. A crisis needs a system that can still interpret, move, and execute after the plan stops matching the world. Normal leadership asks, how do we make this system perform? Crisis leadership asks, what system is still left? How do we keep it functioning long enough to recover? And how do we expand the capabilities that we have based on the current possibility space? A crisis does not reward the leader who knows everything. A crisis rewards the leader that has prepared safety nets, organizational flexibility, and the wherewithal to roll with the punches when the punches get thrown. A crisis does not reward an organization that is hyper-efficient, but so fragile that a minor breeze can topple it over. Crisis rewards the organization that can still allocate food, labor, fuel, information, and authority after the assumptions stop describing reality. And remember, a crisis will always come. I'd like to thank the subreddits and the Discord where we discuss these topics before they go live. Please like, share, and subscribe if you found value in this video. If you really want to help the channel, click on one of these videos. We'll see you next week with new insights and games here on Tactical Mindscapes. Thanks for watching.